Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti Semitism. I'm Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller.
The way in which a group or minority is depicted on the stage or in movies and TV shows has a strong impact on racist or discriminatory attitudes towards those minorities. This also matters for the depiction of Jews or Israelis. We will discuss this with Esti Stimler, playwright, lyricist, and producer in London, who is pursuing a PhD in comedy in musicals. Esti also serves on the board of Stand With Us UK, an organization that supports Zionists and Zionism on campuses in Britain. Esti, it's great to have you on our show. Welcome.
Likewise. Thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So, could you please start with giving us some idea of how other groups than Jews have typically been portrayed on stage and on screens in the past? For instance, women, blacks, or Native Americans, and how that has changed by now.
Well, depictions of anybody in theater always reflect society's biases and what they want to project. Initially, theater was really used by the church to promote and propagate their messages. So women were often reduced to archetypes. They were, the virgin, the whore, the hysteric, the ingenue. And until the 17th century, they weren't even allowed on stage half the time. And in terms of Black characters, unfortunately, and to our great chagrin, they were portrayed by white people in blackface. And they were also reduced to stereotypes of, servility, buffoonery, which, we're trying to make amends for nowadays. Indigenous people were also almost prop characters. They were noble savages, or they were violent enemies. They were literally ciphers to whatever the stories the white patriarchy wanted to tell, and that's in the case of all minorities.
And has that changed by now?
So now these entities are really taking charge of their own narratives. And once they started to do that, things have changed for the better. You don't see what you used to see then. So I think, they've reclaimed their own narratives.
Okay.
What about shows, though?
Sorry?
What about shows today that really encourage anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitic views of Jews?
So shows today, if you want to know about shows today, we have to go back into history and to look at how Jews were depicted throughout time. Yeah. Historically, the stock characters, if we look at Shakespeare's Shylock, for instance, and there's so much imagery that goes along with that, the bent body, and that goes according to. Sorry, just stuck for a second. It reflected that caricature reflected the image that the Jew was the commonplace. People who had never met a Jew, for instance, that's the image that they got of the Jew. Why? Because for centuries, Jews were relegated into doing jobs that weren't anything to do with physical labor. They weren't allowed to own land. So therefore, they had to be moneylenders. And also that combined with the fact that traditionally they were studying the Talmud, create that image of like the stooped Jew, which Charles Dickens in his Fagin, he used that as his trope. And if you see Victorian depictions of Fagin show him almost like that's where the Der Stürmer caricatures from the Nazis came about, just literally from that depiction of Fagin in Oliver Twist on stage, and as well as Shylock in The Merchant of Venice. So in terms of nowadays, if we're trying to do what I was saying before about the other minorities, you have people like Tracy Ann Oberman. I know, well, she will be a name in the United States. She's one of our biggest celebrities here. So she reclaimed Shylock, and she did a gender change where she is Shylock, and she depicts her as a European woman in 1936 Cable Street. So the othering is so complete, and you really see how the energy and the sorry, just scanning the hard drive for the words, because here it's the evening already, so the brain is not as functional as it is in the morning. So you really see the difference between how there's tons of men and they're screaming at this woman, and she's like a little woman, and it's incredible. I think it should really come to Broadway because it really reclaims Shylock as, I think, and there are Shakespeare scholars who discuss this, how Shylock had, he was depicted by Shakespeare to be very, very complex and not so one note, this is the evil money grabbing Jew. And I think that's what Tracy Ann Oberman has done for Shylock. And I think that's really a really positive thing, as well as Simon Lipkin, who is also one of our biggest stars. He was nominated for an Olivier this past year for his depiction of Fagin in Oliver, which is on in the West End at the moment. And what I loved about it, because besides the fact that he's a nice Jewish boy, is that at the end, when he loses all his money, instead of getting hysterical that he's lost all the money, it's more important, this is his interpretation, it was more important for him that he found his boys. So that means, and I thought that was wonderful. That was reclaiming Fagin for us, instead of that the person who puts money above all else, this stooped character. Simon is tall and gorgeous. I think it did really well for us.
So there have been action groups who
we seem to have lost Evelyn.
Hello?
Hi, Evelyn, are you there?
Yes. Hello?
Hi.
Hi. You hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. So I'm sorry for the tech problems. So Esti, with other minorities, Black people, women, we know that there have been action groups who have been advocating hard for different portrayals of their minority or their group in art, in shows. Does something like that exist for Jews, or is it
In theater?
in theater? Yes.
You know what? That's a fantastic question, because as far as I'm aware, it doesn't, and it really needs to. It really, really needs to. I know that Alison Josephs of Jew in the City has a Hollywood bureau that she literally, if there's a negative depiction of Jews, then they will, she has clout and she can get things done. Whereas Jews in theater, we're sort of at the mercy of everything. And not only that, we're supposed to be thankful for every depiction of us. Oh, it's a Jewish show, even if it's negative. Oh, it's a Jewish show. We should all get excited and go there and support it, even if it portrays us in a bad light, which bothers me a lot.
Yes. And so you're saying, if I understand you well, there are Jewish there is a Jewish action group for film, but not for
Film.
theater.
Correct, as far as I know. And if
Okay.
I don't know about it, that's not so good either.
Okay. All right.
And how do you feel about this in terms of, I wince every time I see a negative stereotype of a Jew, particularly in movies and TV. It's just,
It's terrible. It's even worse because with TV, you could turn it off. When you're in the theater, you're literally nearly held hostage in the sense that it's not so easy to leave, and very frequently you've spent quite a bit of money to be there, and it's soul destroying. I find it's terrible.
Yeah, you're saying you can turn off the television, but many
You can turn it,
people
yeah,
don't. But many,
yeah.
many people don't. So,
That's true too. But being there, it's the feeling of safety, of being somewhere where you feel that the depictions are negative and you're sitting there and, okay, like most people pass, but it doesn't matter. You still feel very, very vulnerable. And that feeling of vulnerability it's terrible.
so Jews have in the past been portrayed as money oriented.
wait, can we
What
define
else?
in the past? Because
Well,
I think there's a big difference between 20 years ago and 40 years ago.
let's say up till 20 years ago, um, or up till the 1960s. Let's put it that way. We're
Okay.
the
So,
Middle Ages,
oh, the middle.
Renaissance, whatever you are knowledgeable about.
Yeah.
But
Well,
what is it like a traditional way of portraying Jews on
well,
stage and on
traditionally,
screen?
like I said, Victorian England was notorious with bad. There were bad depictions of Jews. There was a show, I think it was 1825, that was very popular in Germany. I'm trying to think of the name. Gosh, it was something like Der Müller und sein Kind or something like that. And it featured this main character as Aaron, the moneylender. And he was like morally inferior. He also was exploitative. And that was really, really popular. And yeah, and it's so everything sowed the seeds for what happened later.
Yeah. So today there are society or parts, important parts of society, like um, the cultural world, the academic world. They have maybe, yeah, they think of Jews as privileged. They're white privileged. The as Zionists, they are colonial and racist. So, is that something you see back a lot these
Well,
days?
it's very interesting because you're right, because that's a totally different depiction, than it would have been before World War II, when we're, eugenics and racial hierarchies and all
Hmm.
that kind of a thing. Now, yeah, we're considered. I, I personally don't see that. I see more of a problem with depicting visibly identifiable Jews as everything other. So I don't see the problem as being, unless they're going for Israel or, Israel as an entity, or Zionists. I don't see the Jew except for the visibly identifiable Jew, which is a problem. Because if you have, you have put somebody, a character in a black hat and payas, and
Sidewalk. Yeah.
and if they depict everything that's wrong, what they perceive to be wrong with Judaism, even if it's done by a Jew themselves, the problem is where we find ourselves now with anti-Semitism. Those are the people that are going to take the brunt of anti-Semitic vitriol.
Yeah.
And that's what I have an issue with. With maybe a few years ago it wouldn't have been a problem, but right now it is. And right now I think that we have to be more responsible with our storytelling.
So you're saying there is
There's a space.
society became more anti-Semitic, at least overtly.
Yes.
And so we have to be careful.
We have to be careful for our internalized anti-Semitism. In Yiddish theater, because we were talking about tropes and talking about stereotypes and archetypes, Yiddish theater also had all those archetypes of the, the bent scholar and the terrible landlord, and they had all those archetypes, but those were because they were internalized. And the problem now is, and I'm not saying, and God forbid, I'm not saying anybody should cancel anything. I'm really not into that. I just think I love the idea of having some kind of a body to inform and to maybe help people understand where something isn't going to be depicted well. So to increase their sensitivity. I know I have a friend who she does it for LGBTQ, where she advises, she advises theaters on what would be okay and what's not okay. And I would love for them to do that with Jewish depictions.
And then even if Jews
even if they do it themselves, they're
write the shows. Yeah.
Most of the time, they're doing it themselves. Okay. And I have an example which might be contentious. There's, I don't know if you've heard about the show called Giant.
No.
It was a really big hit here. It is in England. It was on the West End, and it's coming to Broadway. It's about Roald Dahl, about how he had an entire breakdown, like a total anti-Semitic, sort of. I don't even know how to say it besides for it was like diarrhea. It just came out when it was such a bad description. He was speaking to a journalist, and the things that he said were so horrific, but so horrific. So this play is about his anti-Semitism. The problem is that the play, although it's excellent, the character of Roald Dahl is the only rounded character in the entire show. So he is depicted as somebody who is a grieving father, a loving husband, and all the other characters are ciphers to his story and what he wants to say. The problem is, because he's so rounded, it carries a weight with what he says.
Yeah.
Which is not the intention, I know, of the Jewish author who wrote the play. And so that's an issue. The only comeback they have, the only person who is an American woman who's like, she's like this hysterical woman where nobody's listening to her. And there was one instance, I went with a friend of mine, and there was one instance where he's talking about how Israel bombed the hell out of Lebanon and created all these amputees and killed so many people, and there was no redress. The people behind me, in the row behind me, said, and I quote, "I didn't know Israel did that to them also." So this is that every single person in that theater, if they don't have context, then they walk out thinking that that's the way it is.
Right.
There was a play also, another play that was on the West End, I know was on Broadway. It's Rose. And the premise of the play is, I don't know if you've seen it, the premise of the play is she's sitting Shiva. It's a one-woman play. She's sitting Shiva. And you don't know why until the end. Turns out she's a Holocaust survivor. She tells her whole story. She finds out that at the end, she's sitting Shiva for a Palestinian child that her grandson settler killed. Now, this came out before October 7th. And I remember sitting there and thinking, every single person who came out of this theater is thinking, wow, all those settlers are really bad. And I'm not saying yes, no, I'm just saying that this is the message that they got. So by the time October 7th happened and everything, they were prepared. They had their knowledge base in their mind, and that came out through theater.
Can I say something? I just want to tell you a story from the 90s.
Okay.
So Rabbi Karen Fox and I were commissioned to write a Jewish holiday book by an imprint of a major publisher. But they didn't want to spend any money on the art. So they said, here's clip art, and you can use it. And all it was the kind of characters that you talked about. Payas. We said, absolutely not. And we paid out of our pocket to have an artist draw like a little lulav and a little, because absolutely not. And it was a companion book for Christmas, only she got a lot, the editor got a lot more. She got all the major holidays and Shabbat. And it still sells on Amazon, Seasons for Celebration.
Oh, good to know. That's nice. But yeah, because that's the problem. It's an easy, listen, archetypes are made for a reason. It's like shorthand. It's visual shorthand. It's much easier to understand something when you have something like to go to and the brain instantly recognizes. The problem is when it creates negativity as a result, it's an issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Esti, you have deep insights in comedy and in Jewish jokes.
Yes.
When are comedy and jokes about Jews okay? And when would you consider it anti-Semitic?
Well, any time, I think it has to be, it's all about power dynamics, comedy. It's, are you punching up? Are you punching out? Are you punching inwards? And if people are laughing with you, that's positive. If they're laughing at you, it's negative. And like Mel Brooks is very interesting because, I'm obsessed with Mel Brooks. Mel Brooks, the producers, at the time when he came out with the producers in the end of the 60s, I can't exactly, because I always get mixed up between that and Fiddler, which was 64. But when Mel Brooks came out with that, it was a bit maybe too soon after the Holocaust had happened. He left it a bit longer when he created the stage show, and it was like the timing was right. It wasn't so raw, but he did something very important, I thought, was that he made fun. He poked fun at the perpetrators, not at the victims. And he was just quoted in last week's Jewish News magazine here in London as saying that he would have never, ever made fun of Holocaust victims. He just would not go there. It's just not something he would do. And I know that, you're a child of survivors. My mother's a survivor. That's how they survive, with their sense of humor. But there's a fine line, and you have to see who's laughing and who's laughing and who feels uncomfortable. And I think that's, that should be some sort of a guideline.
Yeah. Okay. Are comedy and jokes about the Holocaust then not always anti-Semitic? Are you saying that?
Okay, my favorite joke, which I think is actually genius, is a Holocaust survivor dies and he goes to heaven and he tells God a Holocaust joke, and God doesn't laugh. So the Holocaust survivor says, I guess you had to be there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's on so many levels is that genius, because first of all, it's our ownership, and there's so many things to it. God wasn't there, but there are definitely there. My family only uses dark humor like that, but we take ownership. Everything is done through love, which I forgot to mention about Mel. That's also a difference. If things are done through love, it reads, it comes out, because and especially theater as opposed to any other type of art. Theater is all about the exchange of the actors with the audience. That's what it's all about. And if there's a disconnect in the intention, it will come out, and then that's an issue.
Mm-hmm. 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 So, another question: Are comedy and jokes about Jews only okay if these jokes are made by Jews?
I don't think so. I really don't think so. I think that, like I said, if it's done with love, then you can get the intention.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. Okay. Phyllis?
I just wanted to say that I can't remember the author uh, of this particular series, but it's a UK publisher. And when I wrote, because the Brits used to be really anti Semitic in such a casual way that they didn't even realize it. So, in this novel, which is now republished, I mean, it's available now, I just wrote the publisher saying, these are 5 instances in which it have nothing to do with the story.
Wow.
It's just, and I think they should be removed. The way that references to like Little Black Sambo were removed. And the answer I got back from the publishers in the UK and the author's dad is no, we don't want to touch it. And so this book was just recently released, I mean, republished,
Yeah.
and it's all about greed. It's just 5 examples and an entirely unrelated story that's about greedy Jews. So it just
Any other minority, this would not stand. I don't know why it is with us. With us, I mean, there was, well, you know, you talk about the Scarlet Pimpernel. I don't know if you remember that. That's a really, really old.
yeah, I also saw that musical on Broadway.
And the original book was, I mean, he changes into a Jew to you know, to disguise himself, and it's terrible, terrible depiction. But and it was, you're like you're saying, it was mainstream, and we don't have, nobody sticks up to it. And it's also representation, which is really important. We had something here called Falsetto Gate. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No.
Falsetto, the musical Falsetto.
Yeah, I think I've seen it. That's how
Okay.
memorable it was.
Yeah, so it opens up with a scene that's with a scene, 4 Jews in a room bitching. You know, that's the opening number. And they didn't cast any Jews in the entire production. And everybody here was hysterical. They wrote an entire letter to the, you know, to the, and the issue that I had with it, because I know from people in the industry, these Jewish people didn't even get into the audition room. They weren't even auditioning them. So when it came time, and I was like, okay, let's see how this is, you know, let's see if they're able to do this. I went in with a friend of mine, and they were completely open-minded, because he said, you know, actors are actors. They can do anything. They can, but seeing 4 people sing, you know, four Jews in a room bitching, and then they started to do all the oi and the, you know, all that, the Jewish shtick, and it's not nuanced, and it's not natural. And then when they said brachot, and they were all wrong, it's really uncomfortable. And I don't know of another minority group that would stand for it. Honestly, I don't.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we need more action.
Can I just say that again? You don't know of another minority group.
No.
So what I'm saying is that we need to make noise.
Yeah.
We need to galvanize. I love that. Yes, you're right. Yes.
How could we do that, Esti?
You know, I'm banging on my drum. I feel like the only it's like, I don't think anybody wants to hear me anymore, because I'm always talking about, and this is very interesting. Every time I say, let's platform positive Jewish stories, I always get the same answer. We don't censor. We don't censor. We don't believe in censor. I'm not censoring. I'm just saying that it would be nice to platform positive, to incentivize writers to write positive depictions of Jews, which would actually help us, rather than things that will potentially harm us.
Can you give us an example of where that happens? Maybe an example that most people who are not going to the theater.
Very interesting. Also, in this past week's Jewish Chronicle, you can tell I'm very up to date with the Jewish media. And in the past week in the Jewish Chronicle, they had this article that this guy, oh gosh, what was his name? Arno Michaelis or something like that. He was a neo-Nazi. He was a neo-Nazi until he watched Seinfeld. And when he watched Seinfeld and he says something to the effect of, he realizes stupidity. He loves this guy. He loves the humor. Why want to kill him? You know, like doesn't make sense. And
Yeah.
that's what I believe I believe that the connection that we can do through theater is it's so positive. And anybody who leaves the theater with a good feeling and a connection to a Jewish character will not be somebody who is will not be somebody who is so quick to hate them.
So how could writers how could they create that connection between the audience and the Jewish character?
Well, for instance, look, my favorite example is Fiddler, because I am in love with Fiddler. And the funny thing is, people always call
Fiddler
it,
on the Roof?
yes, Fiddler on
Yeah.
the Roof. People always call that like a musical comedy. It's really not. It's really a tragedy. But because of the humor, I call it and I've trademarked it, the Mercutio effect. That you have, let's say in Romeo and Juliet, you had the Mercutio character who was so funny and so adorable, and everyone, because of his sense of humor, everybody felt connected to him. And when he died, everybody was gutted, and you knew this is terrible. With Fiddler on the Roof, it's funny until it isn't. You know, and even when they're forced to leave the house, and he says to his wife, Golda, what are you doing? And she's like, I don't want to leave a mess. That's like hysterical, but it's heartbreaking as well. And people can, like, they can respond to that. They have empathy for that. And I think it's creating that connection through humor, through empathy, and that kind of thing is much better than giving somebody a speech on how it's useless to be anti-Semitic.
Right.
Yes, and I think that what you just said is very important. I think that the empathy part of a play is so much more connected to our understanding of what a Jew is than any talks, including our podcast.
But it's also like the universality of the human experience. And that's also, so let's say, for example, I'm sort of plugging my show, but I'm very excited about it. It's called Smother, and it's about a mother who comes back to life to make sure her daughter gets married. I had a wonderful director doing it for we had a staged reading. And he wasn't Jewish. He was from the north of England. And he said, that's my mother. I had an Irish friend come to watch it. He said, that's my mother. I had an Indian friend. She said, that's my mother. And that's the universality that everybody can experience. And they take away and they feel good. And they're like, they just feel connected. And I think that's the idea, to do it in a positive way.
Yes. So
I think this has been an amazing interview.
Oh, yay. Thank you so much.
And I want to thank you so much for sharing your enthusiasm. I hope that people will be encouraged by what you said to really take on the role of being an overdog. What's the word for theater? Because I'm a big theater person myself, and there are many shows that I come away from saying the anti-Semitism or the ununderstanding of what a Jew is today. Although I have to admit, I did do it for a Black show too, but that was something else. The portrayal of Uncle Tom, one of my interests is that the Uncle Tom part is totally wrong. Harriet Beecher Stowe was one of the most amazing women in the world. But okay, enough about me. So I really, really do hope that there are people who will listen to this program and say, that's something that I can take on.
I
can
really
take
hope
on.
so. I hope so because, like, in as part of my producing, I just produced a show at the Edinburgh Fringe. Marcus is alive, and it's amazing. Marcus Freed. It's a one-man show, and he talks about how he was in a car accident that left him a hit and run in L.A. without insurance because he's British, and how and at the end of it, it was so powerful and spiritual and uplifting. It was so uplifting. And I'm like, yes, this is a story that needs to be told, where
Yeah.
someone finds themselves in adversity and comes out better for it at the other end.
So I think the way you talk about this, um, we could all do that when we have seen a show or a film where it's about Jews. We can all go to our social media, and write about it, and say, "I thought this wasn't a very inspiring story about a Jewish person," or we can say it was a terrible way to portray Jews. We can all be advocates for better stories about Jews,
Sure,
right?
definitely. I
On
love that.
social media, for
I
instance,
love
but
that.
also at the dinner table. Um,
Yes, definitely.
yeah, yes,
Also, it's the clip art that we refused to do in 92.
Yes.
yeah. The
Yeah.
stereotypical Jew, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
And in fact, I don't particularly like the article in the Wall Street Journal today that David Mamet wrote because the art is very, very off putting.
Oh,
So,
look at it.
yeah, so it's an opinion piece. David Mamet, playwright,
Of
famous, famous.
course.
So the art in the Wall Street Journal is of a Jew, but instead of seeing his face, you see the mask of the crooked Jew. Now, it is a mask, but it's really disgusting. And whether I'm going to write a letter or not depends on how much energy I have.
Yeah, that's the thing. It does. It takes so much energy to fight this stuff.
So anyway, I want to thank you, Esty, again. This has just been a marvelous conversation. I want to thank our listeners for listening and hopefully being inspired to do something, even on the granular level.
Absolutely.
And John Irving got history wrong in his newest novel. I wrote the Wall Street Journal 2 weeks ago. They didn't publish the letter. But in Queen Esther, major thing about Hitler.
Ooh.
So I'm just saying, we are all one person, but sometimes the more we make a point, the more people pay attention.
Well, as we say with Hanukkah, from one candle comes the next.
I love
Um,
And thank you so much for having me. Really, really enjoyed it.
And anyway, as we end every program, we say, please speak up against anti Semitism and all hate.